If your mind feels crowded tonight, as though every person you've ever known is standing in the corners of your thoughts, take a moment now. Breathe in slowly. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. You are exactly where you need to be. If you find comfort in this space and wish to return here for rest, I invite you to subscribe to our community. Let us know in the comments where you are resting from tonight and what relationships weigh most heavily on your heart. You are not alone in seeking understanding. There is an old teaching in Zen that says nothing in this life happens by accident. Every person who crosses your path, every face that appears in your story, arrives at the perfect moment. Not necessarily the moment you wanted, but the moment you needed. Tonight, we will explore this mystery together through the gentle wisdom of Zen masters who understood that people are not random visitors in our lives, but teachers dressed in human form. Picture a mountain monastery as twilight settles over the peaks. The air is cool and carries the scent of cedar and stone. In this sanctuary, a young monk named Kenji sat by a window, watching other monks walk the garden paths below. His heart felt heavy. 3 years had passed since he left his village, and he could not understand why certain people from his past still haunted his thoughts. An uncle who had betrayed his family, a childhood friend who had turned away, a teacher who had disappointed him. Master Hakuin found Kenji there in the growing darkness, sitting with shoulders curved inward like a question mark. The old teacher did not speak at first. He simply sat beside his student and watched the same garden, the same fading light. After a long silence, he asked a simple question. Why do you think the river brings certain stones to the shore? Kenji looked at his teacher, confused by this seeming riddle. The current brings them, master. The water's movement. And does the river apologize for the stones it brings? Does it ask your permission? No, master. Life is like this river, Hakuin said softly. It brings people to your shore. Some are smooth and beautiful, others are rough and sharp, but the river does not make mistakes. Each stone has been carried to you for a reason. Your work is not to judge the river, but to understand why each stone arrived. This teaching settled into Kenji's heart, like snow falling on still water. That night, as he lay in his simple room listening to the wind move through the pines, he began to understand that perhaps his uncle, his friend, and his teacher had not entered his life to harm him, but to shape him. They were the rough stones that polished his understanding. They were the difficult teachers who showed him what he still needed to learn about forgiveness, about boundaries, about the nature of disappointment and healing. In another monastery, many years before Kenji's time, there lived a nun named Sister Myonin who kept a small garden of wildflowers. She tended these flowers with devotion, speaking to them as she watered their roots and cleared away the weeds. Other nuns thought this strange, but Sister Myonin had her reasons. One spring morning, a young woman arrived at the monastery gates, her face marked by tears and exhaustion. She had traveled many days to seek counsel. I cannot forgive someone who hurt me, she told Sister Myonin. This person destroyed my peace, and now I carry this pain everywhere I go. How do I make it stop? Sister Myonin led the young woman to her garden. There, among the beautiful blooms, stood several plants that looked damaged. Their leaves were torn, their stems bent. Do you see these flowers? The nun asked. A terrible storm came through here last month. The wind was merciless. It broke many of my plants. The young woman nodded, uncertain where this was leading. I was angry at the storm, Sister Myonin continued. I shouted at the sky. I cursed the wind. But the storm could not hear me. It had already moved on, leaving me here with my anger and my broken garden. She knelt beside one of the damaged plants, gently touching its bent stem. Then I realized something. I could spend my energy hating the storm that had passed, or I could spend it healing what remained. I chose healing. But these plants, the young woman said. They still look broken. Look closer. The young woman knelt beside the nun and saw that where the stems had bent, new growth had emerged. The plant had adapted, found new ways to reach toward the light. It was not the same as before, but it was alive. It was even, in its own way, more beautiful for having survived and transformed. The person who hurt you was like that storm, Sister Myonin said gently. They came, they caused damage, and now they are gone. But you remain, and you must decide each day whether to curse the storm that has passed, or to tend to yourself with the same devotion I tend these flowers. People enter our lives, sometimes as storms, sometimes as gentle rain. Either way, they water something in us, something we did not know needed to grow. The young woman stayed at the monastery for 7 days. Each morning, she helped Sister Myonin in the garden, learning to see herself in those resilient flowers. She learned that forgiveness was not about saying the storm was right to come. It was about refusing to let the storm live forever in her heart. These stories remind us of a fundamental truth that Zen masters have understood for centuries. Every person is a mirror, and in each encounter, we see not only them, but also ourselves. The ones who anger us show us where we still hold rigidity. The ones who disappoint us reveal where we placed expectations that were perhaps too heavy for any human to carry. The ones who love us teach us about our capacity to receive love, to trust, to open. And the ones who leave us teach us about impermanence, about the nature of all things to change and move like seasons. There was a merchant named Takeshi who traveled between villages, selling rice and tea. He was known for his honest measure and fair prices, and for many years his life was peaceful and prosperous. Then one autumn, a man named Hiroshi arrived in the region. Hiroshi was clever and charming, and he quickly won the trust of many villagers. He told Takeshi that he wanted to learn the merchant's trade, to become his apprentice and partner. Takeshi, whose own sons had moved to distant cities, welcomed Hiroshi like family. He taught the young man everything he knew about selecting quality rice, about the delicate art of tea preparation, about treating customers with respect and maintaining their trust. For 2 years, they worked side by side, and Takeshi felt grateful to have found such a capable companion. But in the 3rd year, during the busy harvest season, Hiroshi disappeared. He left in the night, taking with him Takeshi's savings, his best cart, and his list of most valued customers. Worse still, he had apparently been telling these customers lies about Takeshi, preparing them to abandon the old merchant and follow Hiroshi instead. When Takeshi discovered this betrayal, his grief was profound. It was not just the loss of money or customers that wounded him. It was the breaking of trust, the shattering of what he thought was genuine connection. He fell into despair, questioning his judgment, wondering how he had been so blind. For months, he could barely conduct business. His heart had closed like a fist. One evening, as cherry blossoms fell like snow outside his window, Takeshi received a visit from a wandering Zen monk. The monk's name was Teshin, and he had a reputation for wisdom. Takeshi, desperate for guidance, invited him in and shared the whole painful story. He expected the monk to comfort him, to condemn Hiroshi, to validate his suffering. Instead, Teshin asked a strange question. Did you learn anything valuable from Hiroshi during the time he was with you? Takeshi blinked in surprise. Master, he stole from me. He betrayed me. Yes, I heard that part, Teshin said calmly. But I asked what you learned from him. Takeshi wanted to protest, but something in the monk's patient gaze made him pause and actually consider the question. I suppose I learned that I had become too trusting, too naive. And is this not valuable knowledge? But it came at such a terrible cost. Teshin smiled gently. All wisdom has a cost. The question is whether you will allow the cost to be the end of the story, or whether you will let the wisdom become something that serves you and others for the rest of your life. He paused, letting his words settle. Hiroshi entered your life as a teacher, though not the kind you expected. He taught you about the shadow side of human nature. He taught you about protecting yourself while remaining open. He taught you about discernment. These are not small lessons. But Master, Takeshi said, his voice breaking, it still hurts. The betrayal still lives in my chest like a stone. Of course it does, Teshin replied. Pain is pain. It demands to be felt, but you can feel the pain without letting it define your future. You can honor the wound while also extracting the teaching. This is the work of the spiritual practitioner, to see that even the people who harm us are participating in our education, though they may not know it or intend it. The monk stayed with Takeshi that night, and they sat together in meditation. Teshin taught the merchant a practice of breathing into the hurt, of making space for the pain without pushing it away or clinging to it. Imagine, he said, that Hiroshi was sent to you by the universe itself, specifically to teach you these difficult lessons, not because you deserved to suffer, but because you were ready to learn something that could only be learned through this particular difficulty. Can you find any gratitude for the teaching, even while acknowledging the pain of how it arrived? This was perhaps the hardest work Takeshi had ever done. It took many months. But gradually, he began to see that Hiroshi's betrayal had indeed taught him something essential. It had revealed blind spots in his judgment. It had shown him the difference between foolish trust and wise trust. It had taught him to protect his business better, to move more slowly in relationships, to listen to subtle warning signs he had previously ignored. More than this, the experience had broken open his heart in a way that, once healed, made him more compassionate. He understood suffering now in a deeper way. When he encountered other people who had been betrayed or hurt, he could meet them with true empathy, not just sympathy. His wound had become a source of wisdom and connection. Years later, Takeshi actually saw Hiroshi in a distant market. His former apprentice looked older and worn, his face marked by hardship. Their eyes met across the crowd. Takeshi felt the old pain rise up briefly, like an echo, but with it came something else, a recognition that Hiroshi had been traveling his own difficult path, carrying his own karma, driven by his own suffering to make the choices he made. Takeshi did not approach him. He did not need to. The anger had transformed into something quieter, something that felt more like understanding than forgiveness, more like release than reconciliation. That night, in his modest room above his shop, Takeshi lit a candle and sat in meditation. He offered a silent thank you to the universe for sending him every teacher, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones, because they had shaped him into someone deeper, wiser, more awake. This is the mysterious truth that Zen Buddhism invites us to embrace. The people in our lives are not random. They are participants in our becoming. Some stay for seasons, some for moments. Some bring comfort, some bring challenge. But all bring opportunity for growth if we can learn to see them through the lens of teaching rather than judgment. Let your breathing deepen now. Feel your body settling more fully into whatever supports you. As you listen to these stories, you might notice memories arising, faces from your past, conversations that still echo, relationships that ended or transformed. Just notice them. You do not need to do anything with them right now. Simply acknowledge that each person who appeared in your life story played a role in bringing you to this present moment, every single one. In the mountains of northern Japan, there was a monastery known for training the most dedicated practitioners. The head of this monastery was Master Soen, a teacher of formidable presence and penetrating insight. Students came from all over the country hoping to study with him, but his acceptance process was notoriously difficult. Many were turned away. One spring, a young man named Daichi arrived at the gates. He had traveled for weeks to reach this place, having heard stories of Master Soen's wisdom. He knocked on the heavy wooden door and waited. When a senior monk answered, Daiichi explained his desire to study there. The senior monk shook his head. Master Soen is not accepting new students at this time. You should try another monastery. But Daiichi did not leave. He built a small shelter just outside the monastery walls and lived there, meditating each day, making himself useful to the local villagers, demonstrating through his actions his sincere commitment. This continued for 3 months. Every week, he would approach the gates and politely ask if Master Soen might reconsider. Every week, he received the same answer: no. Finally, after the 3rd month, the gates opened and Daiichi was brought before Master Soen. The old teacher looked at him with eyes that seemed to see through all pretense. Why do you persist in staying here when you have been told repeatedly that you are not wanted? Daiichi bowed deeply. Master, I believe I am meant to learn from you. I cannot explain it, but I know this in my bones, so I will wait as long as necessary. Master Soen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You may stay, but I will not be kind to you. I will not make this easy. Do you understand? Yes, Master. And so Daiichi became a student at the monastery. But true to his word, Master Soen was harsh with him. While other students received detailed instruction and patient guidance, Daiichi was given only the most difficult tasks and the briefest explanations. When he made mistakes, the master's criticism was sharp and public. When he succeeded, there was no acknowledgement. Other students whispered among themselves, wondering why their teacher treated Daiichi so differently. For 2 years, this continued. Daiichi's confidence eroded. He began to doubt himself, doubt his calling, doubt whether he had made a terrible mistake in coming here. He felt anger toward Master Soen rising in his heart, a bitter resentment that poisoned his practice. Late at night, he would lie awake wondering why this teacher, whom he had traveled so far to study with, seemed determined to break his spirit rather than elevate it. One winter evening, Daiichi sat in the meditation hall long after other students had retired. Snow fell silently outside, blanketing the world in white. His heart felt equally cold and numb. He was preparing to leave the monastery in the morning, to admit defeat and return to his village in shame. Master Soen entered the hall and sat beside him. They sat in silence for a long time, just the sound of their breathing and the whisper of falling snow. Finally, the master spoke. You are planning to leave. It was not a question. Daiichi nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. Do you know why I have treated you differently than the others? Master Soen asked. Because you wish to punish me for my arrogance in insisting on staying, Daiichi said bitterly. The master made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. No, because from the moment I saw you, I recognized in you the capacity for true awakening. But this capacity was buried under layers of self-importance, under a need for approval, under a desire to be special and chosen. These layers had to be burned away. Daiichi turned to look at his teacher, stunned. I gave the other students what they needed, Master Soen continued. Encouragement, because they were fragile and needed building up. Detailed instruction, because they learned best through careful steps. But you, Daiichi, you needed something else entirely. You needed to have your ego dismantled. You needed to learn to practice without praise. You needed to discover whether your commitment was dependent on my approval or rooted in something deeper and true within yourself. Tears began to stream down Daiichi's face. 2 years of pain and confusion suddenly rearranged themselves into meaning. All this time, you were teaching me. Every single moment, the master said gently. Even now, especially now, in your decision to leave. That decision will teach you whether you practice Zen to please a teacher or because the practice itself has value regardless of external validation. You see, Daiichi, I will not stop you from leaving. That choice is yours alone. But understand this. Whether you stay or go, I have been your teacher, and you have been mine. Your teacher? Daiichi asked, confused. How could I possibly teach you? Master Soen smiled, the first genuine warmth Daichi had seen from him in 2 years. You have taught me about the resilience of sincere commitment. You have reminded me why this path matters, watching you persist even when you felt broken. You have shown me the courage it takes to face doubt and disappointment without hardening your heart completely. Every student who enters my life teaches me something. You think the teaching flows only one direction, but this is not so. We are all teachers. We are all students. These roles dance and exchange like partners in an endless ceremony. Daichi did not leave the monastery that morning. He stayed for 8 more years, completing his training. And in those years, his relationship with Master Soen deepened into something profound and mutual. The harshness was no longer necessary because the lessons it was meant to impart had been absorbed. Now, Daichi could receive the gentler teachings, the subtle transmissions that only became visible once the louder obstacles had been cleared away. On the day Daichi finally left to establish his own practice in a distant province, Master Soen walked him to the gates. Before they parted, the old teacher placed both hands on Daichi's shoulders. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what, Master?" "For arriving in my life exactly when you did. For staying when I pushed you away. For teaching me as much as I taught you. This is the way of true relationship. Both people are transformed." This story illustrates something essential about the difficult people in our lives. Sometimes, those who challenge us most severely are not obstacles to our growth, but catalysts for it. They arrive with a specific medicine we need, even if that medicine tastes bitter. Our work is not to curse the medicine, but to extract its healing properties and allow ourselves to be transformed. Consider your own life for a moment. Is there someone who challenged you, who was hard on you, who did not give you the approval you sought? Can you imagine, even for a moment, that this person was playing a specific role in your development? Not to harm you, but to strengthen something in you that could only be strengthened through that particular challenge. This does not mean you must maintain relationships with difficult people. Boundaries are sacred, but it does mean you can extract wisdom even from painful encounters. Let your breath flow naturally. Let your body sink deeper into rest. We are not finished with our journey tonight, but you are doing beautifully. Just listening, just receiving these stories, you are engaging in the work of understanding the relational nature of spiritual growth. There was once a woman named Aya who lived in a coastal village. She was known for her generous heart, always the first to help when someone fell ill, always ready to share her harvest with neighbors in need. Aya believed that love and kindness would naturally be returned to her, that the goodness she put into the world would come back multiplied. For many years, this seemed to be true. Her life was full of friendship and community. But then a difficult period began. Her husband fell ill and required constant care. Her small business struggled. And in her time of greatest need, many of those she had helped before were suddenly unavailable. Some avoided her, uncomfortable with witnessing suffering. Others had excuses, plausible reasons why they could not offer the support she once gave so freely. Aya felt a terrible bitterness growing in her heart. She had given so much, and now when she needed help, people disappeared like morning mist. She began to question everything. Had all those friendships been false? Had people only valued her for what she could provide? The sweetness in her heart turned sour, and she found herself withdrawing, building walls where once there had been open doors. One afternoon, as she sat by the ocean watching waves crash against rocks, an old woman approached and sat beside her without asking permission. This woman's name was Noriko, and she had a reputation in the village as someone who spoke uncomfortable truths. "You are angry," Noriko observed. Aya did not deny it. "I gave everything to this community, and now they abandon me." "Did you give to receive?" Noriko asked. "No," Aya said quickly. "I gave because it felt right, because I wanted to help." "Then why do you feel cheated?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Aya opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Why did she feel cheated if she had truly given without expectation? The question exposed something she had not wanted to see. Perhaps underneath her generosity, there had been an unspoken contract, an assumption that her kindness would be repaid, that love given would equal love returned in the same measure. Noriko continued gently. The people who have disappointed you are teaching you something important. They are showing you the difference between genuine generosity and generosity with strings attached. They are revealing expectations you did not know you held. This is painful, but valuable teaching. So I should just accept being abandoned? Aya asked, her voice sharp with hurt. No, Noriko said. You should see clearly what is happening without letting it poison your heart completely. Some people in our lives are capable of deep reciprocity. Others are not. This does not make them evil. It makes them human, with their own limitations and fears. Your disappointment is teaching you to discern between different types of relationships, to adjust your expectations to match reality rather than wish. That sounds like giving up on people, Aya said. It is not giving up. It is seeing clearly. And clear seeing allows you to give your energy to the relationships that can truly hold it, rather than pouring yourself into vessels that leak. Noriko paused, watching a seabird dive into the waves. But here is the deeper teaching. Even the people who disappointed you served a purpose. They revealed something about yourself you needed to know. They showed you where you were still operating from hidden expectation rather than true freedom. This is a gift, though it feels like betrayal. Aya sat with this teaching as the tide came in, waves erasing the boundary between sand and sea. Slowly, she began to understand. Her husband's illness and her business struggles had been a kind of filter, revealing which relationships were rooted in genuine connection and which were more superficial. This was not a judgment against those who stepped back. People had their reasons, their own struggles, their own limitations. But it was useful information. More importantly, the experience was teaching her about the quality of her own giving. Was she giving to feel good about herself? To create obligation? To ensure future support? Or could she give simply because generosity was an expression of who she was, regardless of return? This was much harder work than she had imagined. It required releasing resentment while also honoring the real hurt she felt. It required seeing people clearly without demonizing them. It required adjusting her expectations without becoming cynical. Over time, Aya found a new kind of balance. She continued to be generous, but more discerningly. She deepened her relationships with the few friends who had shown up during her difficult time, recognizing their value. And she released with compassion her attachment to those who had pulled away. They had taught her what they came to teach. She did not need to carry resentment as well as lesson. Years later, when her husband had recovered and her business had stabilized, Aya found herself helping a young woman in the village who was experiencing similar disappointments. She shared her story, including the teaching from old Noriko. Everyone you meet is a teacher, she told the young woman, even the ones who disappoint you. Especially them. They show you where you still need to grow, what you still need to learn. Accept the teaching with gratitude, and then release the teacher with compassion. This is the way forward. This wisdom is not easy to embody. It requires that we hold two truths simultaneously. First, that our hurt is real and deserves acknowledgement. Second, that even painful relationships can serve our evolution if we can extract their teaching without being destroyed by their difficulty. This is the narrow path the Buddha spoke of, the middle way between denial of suffering and drowning in suffering. Breathe deeply now. Let these stories work on you the way water works on stone, gradually, persistently, shaping you through their gentle insistence. You do not need to force understanding. It will arrive in its own time. In the mountains of ancient China, there was a monastery where a young monk named Wei struggled with feelings of inadequacy. He compared himself constantly to his Dharma brothers, always finding himself lacking. One was more disciplined in meditation. Another was more learned in scripture. A third was beloved by the master for his devotional sincerity. Wei felt invisible, ordinary, without special qualities or talents. His bitterness grew until it became a kind of poison in his practice. He snapped at other monks. He neglected his duties. He became so consumed with his own perceived inadequacy that he could barely function. Finally, the abbot called him in for a private meeting. "Why do you suffer?" the abbot asked. "Because I have nothing special to offer," Wei said. "I am not the best at anything. I am not noticed. I am not valued." The abbot nodded slowly. "And who taught you that you needed to be special to have value?" Wei opened his mouth to answer, then realized he did not know. Where had this belief come from? When had he decided that ordinariness was a failure? "I will tell you who taught you," the abbot said. "Every person you have compared yourself to. They are your teachers, though you have misunderstood their lesson. You think they are here to show you your inadequacy, but actually, they are here to show you the prison of comparison, to reveal the suffering that comes from measuring your worth against others." "But surely we must strive to improve," Wei protested. "Surely some monks are more advanced than others." "There is a difference between sincere practice and the tyranny of comparison," the abbot replied. "Sincere practice asks, how can I deepen my understanding today? Comparison asks, how do I rank against others? The first leads to growth. The second leads to the suffering you are experiencing now." He gestured for Wei to follow him outside. They walked through the monastery grounds to a place where many different trees grew together. "Look at these trees," the abbot said. "This one is tall and straight. This one is gnarled and twisted. This one has beautiful blossoms. This one has none. Tell me, which tree is the best tree?" Wei understood this was not a literal question. "Each has its own nature, I suppose." "Exactly. And does the twisted tree suffer because it is not straight? Does the tree without blossoms feel inadequate compared to the flowering tree?" "No, master. Trees simply grow according to their nature. And yet you, who are supposedly more conscious than a tree, cause yourself tremendous suffering by refusing to accept your own nature." The abbot's voice was gentle but firm. "Wei, you are here to become more fully yourself, not to become a copy of someone else. The monks you envy are your teachers because they trigger this comparison in you, revealing a pattern of thinking that causes suffering. Once you see this pattern clearly, you can release it. Then you will be free to grow according to your own nature." This teaching cracked something open in Wei's understanding. He began to notice how automatically the comparison arose. Whenever he saw another monk excelling, his mind immediately created a hierarchy with himself at the bottom. But now, having seen this pattern, he could choose differently. He could appreciate another's gifts without making them evidence of his own lack. It took time. Habits of mind do not dissolve overnight, but gradually, Wei found a new relationship with his Dharma brothers. Instead of rivals, they became mirrors showing him different possibilities of being. Each one's strength was no longer a commentary on his weakness, but simply an expression of their unique path. One day, several years later, a new young monk arrived. This monk was brilliant and talented, immediately excelling in every area of practice. Wei watched the other monks begin to compare themselves to this newcomer, watched the subtle jealousies and insecurities arise, and he understood, with deep compassion, that this brilliant young monk had arrived to teach them all the same lesson Wei had struggled to learn, not by intention, but simply by being who he was. Wei approached the newcomer one afternoon and said, "Welcome, teacher. I am grateful for what you will show us about ourselves." The young monk looked confused. "I am not a teacher. I am only a student like you." Wei smiled. "We are all teachers. We are all students. Every person who enters your life reveals something you need to see, something you need to learn. You cannot help but teach simply by being present and authentic. and I cannot help but learn if I am paying attention. This is perhaps one of the most profound recognitions in Zen practice, that everyone is teaching everyone all the time, not through formal instruction, but through the simple fact of encounter. The person who makes you angry is teaching you about anger. The person who makes you jealous is teaching you about desire and comparison. The person who loves you is teaching you about your capacity to receive love. The person who abandons you is teaching you about impermanence and resilience. None of this means you should accept harmful behavior or stay in destructive relationships. Wisdom includes discernment and boundary setting. But it does mean that even as you protect yourself, even as you walk away from what damages you, you can recognize the teaching embedded in the encounter. You can ask, what did this relationship reveal about me? What do I need to learn? What pattern am I being shown? Let your body become heavier now, sinking into complete support. Let your breath flow without any effort to control it. You are safe here, held by these stories, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of practitioners who walked this path before you. They discovered that relationships, in all their complexity, are the laboratory of awakening. There was once a respected meditation teacher named Jiro who ran a small practice center in the countryside. Students came from distant cities to attend his retreats and study his methods. Jiro had a reputation for being skilled, compassionate, and insightful. He felt good about the work he was doing, confident in his ability to guide others toward deeper understanding. Then one year, a student named Kaito joined the center. Kaito was sharp, questioning, and difficult. He challenged Jiro's teachings openly. He pointed out inconsistencies in the instructions. He asked questions that Jiro could not easily answer. The other students were uncomfortable with Kaito's confrontational style, and several complained to Jiro privately, asking him to ask this troublesome student to leave. Jiro was tempted. It would be easy to expel Kaito, to restore the harmony and deference he was accustomed to. But something stopped him. Instead of pushing Kaito out, Jiro decided to lean into the discomfort. He stayed with the difficult questions. He examined his own teachings more carefully. He noticed his attachment to being seen as wise, his subtle craving for students' approval, his aversion to being challenged. It was painful work. Jiro's ego protested loudly. But underneath the discomfort, he found something valuable. Kaito was showing him the places where his teaching had become stale, where he was repeating phrases he had heard others say without truly embodying their meaning. Kaito was forcing him to deepen, to question his assumptions, to grow beyond the comfortable identity of respected teacher. One evening, after a particularly difficult exchange during a group discussion, Jiro sat alone in meditation. He found himself feeling genuine gratitude for Kaito's presence. This difficult student was the best teacher he had encountered in years. By refusing to simply accept everything Jiro said, Kaito was demanding that Jiro bring his absolute best, his most honest understanding, his deepest truth. This was an extraordinary gift, though it came wrapped in very uncomfortable packaging. Jiro began to work with Kaito differently. Instead of defending his teachings, he met the young man's questions with genuine curiosity. "You may be right," he would say. "Let us explore this together." This shift in approach transformed their relationship. Kaito softened, no longer needing to push so hard against what he perceived as rigid authority, and Jiro expanded, discovering new dimensions in teachings he thought he had mastered. The other students, watching this unfold, received their own teaching. They saw that challenge and discomfort could be doorways to growth rather than problems to eliminate. They learned that true confidence comes not from having all the answers, but from being willing to sit with questions. They witnessed their teacher becoming more authentic, more humble, more alive, through the very difficulty they had wanted him to expel. Years later, after Kaito had left to establish his own practice, Jiro would tell new students about him. "The person who challenges you most severely may be your greatest benefactor," he would say. "If you have the courage to receive their challenge as teaching, rather than attack. You will grow in ways you never imagined. Kaito entered my life to save me from spiritual stagnation. He was a bodhisattva in disguise, wearing the mask of difficulty to get my attention. This story points to something subtle and important. Sometimes the people who serve us best are not those who comfort us, but those who disturb us. The ones who refuse to let us coast, who demand we bring our full presence and authenticity, who challenge our comfortable stories about ourselves. These relationships are not easy. They often feel threatening or irritating. But if we can stay present with the discomfort rather than running from it, we discover they contain rare medicine. Think about your own life. Is there someone who consistently challenges you, who does not let you get away with your usual patterns, who sees through your defenses? Consider the possibility that this person is serving your evolution, even if it does not feel good, even if you wish they would just let you be. What if their presence in your life is not accidental, but precisely calibrated to show you something you need to see? This does not mean you should seek out difficult people or stay in abusive situations. Discernment is crucial. Some challenges are genuinely toxic and should be avoided, but many challenges are uncomfortable precisely because they touch something true, something we would rather not examine. Learning to tell the difference between toxic challenge and growth-inducing challenge is part of the practice. Breathe deeply. Let these teachings seep into your consciousness like rain soaking into earth. There is no rush. Understanding unfolds in layers, each one revealing itself in the right time. In a small village near the sea, there lived an elderly woman named Hannah who spent her days sitting by the water, mending fishing nets for the villagers. She had done this work for decades, her fingers moving with the practiced ease of long repetition. People would often sit with her while she worked, sharing their troubles, seeking her perspective. Though Hannah had never studied formally with any master, her words carried the weight of deep understanding. One day, a middle-aged man named Tomo came to sit with her. His face was etched with pain and confusion. "Hana-san, I need your wisdom. My son has rejected me. After everything I did for him, every sacrifice I made, he has cut me out of his life completely. He says I was too controlling, too critical, but I only wanted the best for him." How can he not see that? How can he be so ungrateful? Hana continued mending the net as she listened, her fingers working steadily. When Tomo finished speaking, she held up the net so he could see it clearly. "Do you see how this net is made?" she asked. Tomo looked at the intricate pattern of knots and lines. "Yes. Each strand is connected to others. That is what makes it a net. But notice, there is space between the strands. The net does not try to be solid cloth. If it did, it would not work. The fish would see it coming and swim away. The water would push against it too hard. The net functions precisely because it is full of empty space, because it allows flow, even as it holds form." She set the net down and looked directly at Tomo. "Your relationship with your son was perhaps like a net that tried to become cloth. You wanted to hold him so tightly, guide him so completely, that you left no space for him to move, to breathe, to be separate from you. This did not come from bad intention. It came from love. But love that does not allow space becomes suffocation." Tomo felt tears rising. "But I only wanted to protect him from making mistakes. I only wanted him to have a good life." "Yes," Hana said gently. "But whose definition of good life? Yours or his? And whose mistakes were you really protecting him from, his or your own?" She paused to let this land. Parents often try to save their children from repeating their own regrets, but children must be allowed to live their own lives, make their own mistakes, find their own wisdom. When we try to control another person's path, even with good intentions, we deny them the very experiences that will help them grow. So, my son entering my life and then leaving it, he came to teach me to let go? Tomo asked. "He came to teach you many things," Hana replied, "about the difference between love and control, about the importance of space in relationships, about accepting that people you love may choose paths you do not understand or agree with. About releasing attachment to specific outcomes. These are profound teachings. But it hurts so much, Tomo said, his voice breaking. Of course it does. Love without attachment is one of the most difficult practices. But consider this. Your son's rejection has brought you here, to this conversation. It has forced you to examine your behavior and intentions. It has cracked open your heart in a way that, once healed, will make you more compassionate and less controlling with everyone you encounter. He has given you an opportunity for profound transformation. Is this not a strange kind of gift? Tomo sat with Hana for a long time that afternoon, watching the waves, feeling the complicated mix of pain and insight swirling in his chest. Over the following months, he did the difficult work of examining his patterns. He recognized how his fear had masqueraded as care. He saw how his own unlived dreams had been projected onto his son. He began, slowly and painfully, to release his grip on how he thought things should have been. Eventually, after a year of this inner work, Tomo wrote a letter to his son. He did not defend himself or explain his intentions. He simply acknowledged the truth of what his son had said. He apologized for the ways his love had become controlling. He expressed, without expectation of response, his wish that his son could live fully and freely according to his own nature and choices. And he said, "Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to set boundaries. Thank you for being a teacher, even though neither of them had realized that was the role being played." The son did eventually respond, though it took several more months. Their relationship did rebuild, but it looked different than before. There was more space in it now, more room for both of them to be themselves. The net had learned to function as a net, not cloth, and paradoxically, with more space came more genuine connection. They could finally meet as two separate human beings, rather than as extensions of each other. Hana's teaching about the net applies to so many relationships. We often hold too tightly, trying to control outcomes, trying to make people be who we want them to be, rather than who they are. And when they resist or pull away, we feel hurt and betrayed. But what if their resistance is exactly the teaching we need? What if they came into our lives specifically to show us where we are holding too tight, where we need to create more space, where we need to trust in the natural unfolding of things rather than forcing our will upon them? This is especially true in parent-child relationships, but it applies to friendships, romantic partnerships, and even professional relationships. The desire to control others, even when motivated by love or care, creates suffering for everyone involved. Learning to love while allowing freedom, to care while respecting autonomy, to offer guidance while honoring another's path. This is advanced spiritual work. Let your breathing become even more relaxed. Notice how breath comes in without effort, goes out without effort. This is the natural rhythm of life. Things arise, things pass. People enter, people leave. Relationships form, transform, sometimes end. All of this is the dance of impermanence that the Buddha taught about. Our suffering comes not from the dance itself, but from our resistance to it, our insistence that things should be different than they are. In ancient Japan, there was a samurai named Kenshin, who was known throughout the land for his skill with the sword and his code of honor. He had trained under the greatest sword masters, won countless duels, and earned the respect of lords and peasants alike. His reputation was his most prized possession. It defined who he was. Then one day, a young ronin challenged him publicly, making wild accusations about Kenshin's past, claiming he had acted dishonorably in a battle years before. The accusations were false, but they were spread loudly enough that people began to whisper. Kenshin's perfect reputation was suddenly tarnished by this man's lies. Kenshin was consumed with rage and shame. He wanted to challenge the ronin to a duel, to kill him for these lies. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was his age, or weariness, or some subtle shift in consciousness. Instead of immediately seeking revenge, He went to visit a Zen master who lived on the edge of the territory. He told the master his story, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. The master listened without interruption. When Kenshin finished, the master asked a simple question. "Who are you without your reputation?" Kenshin stared at him. "What do you mean? My reputation is the result of my lifetime of honorable service. It is proof of my character." "Is it?" the master asked. "Or is your character something independent of what others think or say about you?" He poured tea for both of them, the steam rising in delicate spirals. "This Ronin who has appeared in your life, what if he is a teacher sent to show you how much of your identity rests on external validation? What if he is here to ask you the question, who are you when that external validation is removed?" "I am a samurai of honor," Kenshin said firmly. "Yes, you tell me that. But can you know it for yourself, regardless of what anyone else says? Can your honor exist in your own heart even if the entire world calls you dishonorable?" This question opened up a chasm beneath Kenshin's feet. He realized that his entire sense of self was built on others' opinions. His honor was real only insofar as it was recognized. Without that recognition, he felt he was nothing. This realization was terrifying, but also illuminating. "What should I do?" he asked the master. "You could kill the Ronin and restore your reputation through violence," the master said. "Or you could allow this experience to kill something in you that needs to die, your attachment to external validation, your dependence on others' approval for your sense of worth. Which death would serve your evolution more?" Kenshin stayed with the master for 3 days, sitting in meditation, wrestling with these questions. It was some of the hardest inner work he had ever done. Facing an opponent's sword had been easier than facing the hollowness in his own sense of identity. But gradually, something shifted. He began to feel a different kind of strength, one that did not require external validation. He began to know his own character from the inside, not as a reflection in others' eyes, but as a direct experience of his own integrity. When he left the master's temple, he did not seek out the Ronin for revenge. Instead, he continued his life much as before, serving with honor, helping those who needed help. Some people believed the Ronin's lies, others did not. Kenshin found that he could live with both. His worth was no longer something others could give or take away. It was something he carried within himself. Years later, the Ronin who had spread the lies fell on hard times. He was injured in a fight and left destitute, abandoned by those he had once called friends. By chance, he ended up in the territory where Kenshin lived. Hearing of the injured man's situation, Kenshin went to him. He did not reveal his identity at first. He simply helped the Ronin, providing medicine, food, and shelter until the man recovered. Only when the Ronin was well enough to travel did Kenshin reveal who he was. The Ronin fell to his knees, terrified, expecting revenge. Instead, Kenshin said, "You came into my life as a great teacher. You showed me that I had built my identity on sand, on the shifting opinions of others. You forced me to find firmer ground. For this, I thank you. Go in peace." The Ronin was so moved by this that he spent the rest of his life speaking of Kenshin's true character, trying to undo the lies he had spread. But by then, Kenshin did not need this redemption. He had already found something more valuable than reputation: true self-knowledge. This story teaches us about enemies and critics, those who seem to enter our lives to tear us down or make us suffer. What if even they are teachers? What if they show us where our foundation is weak, where we have built our sense of self on unstable ground? What if their criticism, even when unjust, reveals our attachment to being seen in a certain way? This does not make their behavior right or excuse genuine harm, but it does mean we can extract wisdom even from injustice. How many people in your life have you cast as villains? What if you could reframe them as difficult teachers? What if the person who betrayed you came to teach you about trust and discernment? What if the person who rejected you came to teach you about self-worth that is not dependent on external acceptance? What if the person who hurt you came to teach you about boundaries and resilience? This reframing does not deny the pain. It does not excuse the behavior, but it transforms victim consciousness into student consciousness. And that transformation is profoundly empowering. Let your body soften even more. Let your mind become quiet, like a pond when the wind stops. We are moving deeper into the night, deeper into rest, deeper into understanding. These stories are working on levels you may not consciously register. That is fine. The deepest teachings often bypass the intellectual mind and plant seeds directly in the heart. There was once a talented artist named Yuki who created beautiful pottery. Her work was sought after by collectors and displayed in important galleries. She took great pride in her skill, her unique style, her growing recognition. Then a younger artist appeared in her city, also working with clay, also creating beauty. This younger artist's style was different from Yuki's, but equally compelling. At first, Yuki welcomed the younger artist, whose name was Mei. She offered advice, shared resources, behaved generously. But as Mei's work began to receive more attention, as collectors started choosing Mei's pieces over Yuki's, something dark stirred in Yuki's heart. Jealousy, resentment, a terrible sense of threat and diminishment. Yuki began to withdraw from Mei. She stopped being helpful. In her mind, she criticized Mei's work, finding flaws, telling herself that Mei was overrated, that the collectors had poor taste. This jealousy poisoned Yuki's own creativity. She found herself unable to work with the same joy and freedom she once had. She was too busy comparing herself to Mei, too consumed with resentment. One day, while struggling at her wheel, unable to center the clay properly because her mind was so agitated, Yuki felt a wave of despair. She looked at her hands, covered in wet clay, and wondered what had happened to her love of this work. When had creating become about competition rather than expression? When had another artist's success become a commentary on her own worth? She realized that Mei had not done anything to her. Mei was simply living her life, creating her art, receiving the natural consequences of her talent and hard work. The suffering Yuki felt was entirely self-created. It came from her own mind, her own comparisons, her own attachment to being special and recognized. This realization was both painful and liberating. Painful because it meant she could not blame Mei for her suffering. Liberating because it meant she had the power to change her relationship to the situation. Yuki sat at her wheel for a long time that day, not working but simply sitting with this new understanding. She began to practice something radical. Instead of pushing away thoughts of Mei, instead of feeding her resentment, she began to genuinely wish Mei well. At first, this felt forced and false, but she persisted. Each morning, as part of her meditation practice, she would sit quietly and direct thoughts of goodwill toward Mei. May you thrive. May your work bring joy. May you find fulfillment. It was difficult. Her ego protested loudly, but slowly, over weeks and months, something shifted. As Yuki's resentment loosened its grip, her own creativity returned. She found herself able to work with joy again, not because she was competing, but because the act of creation itself was fulfilling. And something else happened. She began to see Mei's work differently. Instead of a threat, it became inspiration. Mei's different approach gave Yuki new ideas, new directions to explore. They were not competitors fighting over a limited pie, but fellow explorers in the vast territory of creative expression. Eventually, Yuki reached out to Mei again. She apologized for her withdrawal, her coldness. She explained, with vulnerability, what she had been experiencing. Mei, who had been hurt by Yuki's sudden distance, listened with compassion. She admitted that she too had struggled with jealousy toward artists whose work she admired. The two women became genuine friends after that, supporting each other's work, collaborating on projects, celebrating each other's successes. And Yuki understood that Mei had been a profound teacher, not by intention, but simply by existing, by being talented, by receiving recognition. Mei had revealed Yuki's own insecurity and her attachment to external validation. This revelation, though painful, had ultimately freed Yuki to find a deeper relationship with her art and with herself. Jealousy is one of the most uncomfortable emotions to experience and acknowledge. We feel diminished by it, ashamed of it. But what if jealousy is actually a messenger? What if the people who trigger our jealousy are showing us something important? Usually, they are showing us desires we have not acknowledged or gifts we have not developed. When we feel jealous of someone's success, what we are really saying is, I want that too. I want recognition, or freedom, or creative expression, or whatever that person seems to have. Rather than pushing jealousy away or feeling ashamed of it, we can investigate it. What is this jealousy revealing about what I want, about what I have not allowed myself to pursue, about where I am making unfair comparisons? The person who triggers jealousy is a mirror. They are not the problem. They are showing us something about ourselves that we need to see and work with. Your breath continues, steady and reliable. In and out, like waves on a shore. You are held by something larger than yourself, larger than any individual relationship. You are held by the great web of interconnection that links all beings. Every person you have ever encountered is a thread in this web. Some threads are bright and obvious, others are subtle, barely visible, but all are part of the pattern that makes you who you are in this moment. There was a teacher named Ishin who worked with dying patients, helping them find peace in their final days. Over the years, she sat with hundreds of people as they faced death. And she noticed a pattern. In those final days and hours, people very rarely talked about their accomplishments or possessions. What they talked about were relationships. They spoke of people they loved, people they had hurt, people they wished they had treated better, people who had shaped them in crucial ways. Ishin came to understand that relationships were not separate from spiritual practice. They were the very substance of spiritual practice. Every encounter, every conversation, every moment of connection or conflict was an opportunity for awakening. The people in our lives, she realized, are the koans we must work with, the paradoxes we must sit with, the puzzles that reveal truth when approached with attention and care. One of her patients was a businessman named Akio, who had spent his life building a commercial empire. He had been ruthless in competition, single-minded in pursuit of success. But now, facing death, none of that seemed to matter. What haunted him was a brother he had betrayed 30 years earlier in a business deal. They had not spoken since. I need to make it right, Akio told Ishin, but he won't see me. He won't take my calls. Ishin asked, What did your brother teach you? Akio looked confused. Teach me? He hates me. What did the broken relationship teach you? What have you learned from this 30-year estrangement? Akio was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, I learned that success without integrity is hollow. I learned that I valued the wrong things. I learned what it feels like to lose someone you love because of your own actions. His eyes filled with tears. I learned that I was capable of great cruelty when I was afraid. These are profound teachings, Ishin said gently. Your brother gave you these teachings, whether he intended to or not. You can honor those teachings even if reconciliation is not possible. But I want to apologize, Akio said. Then write a letter, say everything you need to say. Send it or not, that is up to you. But the practice is in the saying, in the acknowledging, in the taking of responsibility. Your brother may never forgive you, but you can still extract the teaching and allow it to transform you. Akio did write the letter. He poured everything into it, all his regrets and realizations and sorrow. He sent it, not knowing if his brother would read it. His brother never responded. But in the last days before Akio died, he told Ishin that he felt at peace. My brother taught me what I needed to learn, he said. I am grateful for that teaching, even though it came through pain, even though we never reconciled. The teaching was the gift. The relationship served its purpose. This story points to something essential about how relationships function in our spiritual development. Some relationships are meant to last a lifetime. Others are meant for a season, a chapter, a specific teaching. When we can see this clearly, we can release our grip on how we think relationships should be and accept how they actually are. We can be grateful for what each person brought to our life without demanding that they stay forever or continue to serve the role we want them to play. Sometimes people enter our lives for a brief moment and change everything. Other times, people are with us for decades, but their teaching is subtle, revealed slowly over time. There is no hierarchy of value in this. A 5-minute conversation with a stranger can be as transformative as a 20-year marriage if we are present and attentive to what is being offered. Think of someone who was in your life for only a short time but left a lasting impact. What did they teach you? What door did they open? What possibility did they reveal? Now think of someone who has been a constant presence. What slow teaching have they offered through their consistent presence? Both types of relationships matter. Both are sacred in their own way. Your breathing is so gentle now, so easy. You are drifting in that liminal space between waking and sleeping, where understanding arrives without effort, where truth seeps in through the cracks in your defenses. Stay in this space. Let these stories continue to work on you. There was once a monk named Ghassan who lived alone in a mountain hermitage. He had spent decades in intensive practice, and his realization was deep. Students occasionally made the difficult journey to study with him, but he accepted very few. He seemed to need no one, content in his solitude and his direct experience of truth. Then one winter, a young woman appeared at his door. Her name was Ko, and she was fleeing an arranged marriage. She begged Ghassan to let her stay, to teach her the Dharma, to help her find refuge in spiritual practice. Ghassan's first instinct was to send her away. He was old now. He valued his solitude. He did not want the complication of a female student, the potential for gossip or misunderstanding. But something in Ko's eyes stopped him. Some authentic desperation and seeking that he recognized from his own youth. Against his better judgment, he allowed her to stay. She could live in the small shed beside his hermitage. He would teach her, but she must follow strict rules and respect the boundaries of their student-teacher relationship. For the first year, everything went smoothly. Ko was a dedicated student, rising early for meditation, working hard at her assigned tasks, asking thoughtful questions. Ghassan found, to his surprise, that teaching her revitalized his own practice. Her fresh perspective, her beginner's questions, forced him to articulate understanding he had taken for granted, to examine teachings he had not questioned in years. But in the second year, difficulties arose. Ko began to challenge Ghassan's methods. She questioned whether his approach was too austere, too removed from ordinary life. She suggested that perhaps his decades of solitary practice had made him wise in some ways, but inexperienced in others. She pointed out that he had never had to practice patience with a difficult spouse, or maintain equanimity while caring for sick children, or find compassion in the middle of complex family dynamics. Ghassan was offended. Who was this young student to question his realization? But her words lodged in his mind like splinters. He found himself unable to simply dismiss them. Late at night, sitting in meditation, he had to admit there was truth in what she said. He had achieved a certain kind of peace, yes, but it was the peace of withdrawal, of controlling his environment to minimize difficulty. He had never had to practice in the middle of real relationship complexity. Ko was showing him something he had not wanted to see. His spiritual path, while genuine, had been limited by his avoidance of certain challenges. He had mastered solitary practice, but had not tested his realization in the fire of intimate relationship, family responsibility, and emotional complexity. This was not a failing exactly, but it was a limitation. and Kaio's presence was making that limitation visible. Over the next several years, their relationship evolved in unexpected ways. It was not romantic, but it became deeply familial. Kaio, who had fled one family, found another in Gasan. And Gasan, who had thought he needed no one, discovered that he needed her. Not in a dependent way, but as a mirror, a challenge, a reminder that practice must ultimately encompass all of life, not just the parts we can control. When Gasan finally died at the age of 87, Kaio was with him. His last words to her were, "You saved me from becoming a ghost, from disappearing completely into emptiness. You taught me that true realization must include relationship, must include the messy humanity I tried to transcend. Thank you for being my teacher." After his death, Kaio stayed at the hermitage. She became known as a teacher herself, one who emphasized integration rather than escape, who taught that enlightenment must be tested and lived in the context of real relationships and ordinary life. Students came to her because she could speak to both the absolute and the relative, both the emptiness that Gasan had mastered and the fullness of engaged life that she had insisted upon. This story illustrates something crucial. We often think of teachers as those who are older, more experienced, formally authorized. But teaching and learning happen in all directions. The young teach the old. The beginner teaches the master. The student forces the teacher to clarify and deepen their understanding. Every relationship is an exchange, a mutual shaping, a dance of influence that moves both partners. When we rigidly define roles, when we insist that influence flows only one way, we miss half the teaching. The parent learns from the child. The teacher learns from the student. The healer is healed by the patient. The helper is helped by helping. This is not a breakdown of appropriate boundaries. It is a recognition that we are all, always, both teaching and learning, both giving and receiving. Consider your own relationships through this lens. Where have you been taught by someone you thought you were teaching? Where has helping someone actually served your own growth and healing? Where has a person in a lesser role shown you something profound? If you look carefully, you will find that the teaching has always been flowing in multiple directions, not just the one you were consciously aware of. Your body is completely relaxed now, held by the surface beneath you, surrendered to gravity's gentle pull. Your mind is quiet, thoughts are rising and dissolving like clouds in a vast sky. You are safe here, resting in the understanding that every person who has ever touched your life, in whatever way, has participated in making you who you are in this moment. There is nothing to forgive because there is nothing that should have been different. Everything happened exactly as it needed to, bringing you to this exact moment of awareness and rest. In a small temple in Korea, there lived a master named Seung San, who was known for his unconventional teaching methods. He would sometimes hit students with a stick, sometimes laugh uproariously at their questions, sometimes respond to sincere inquiries with nonsense phrases. Students never knew what to expect from him, and this unpredictability kept them alert and present. One day, a very intellectual student named Jiwoo came to study with Seung San. Jiwoo had read all the important texts, could recite sutras from memory, and loved to engage in philosophical debate about the nature of mind and reality. He came to the master expecting sophisticated Dharma discussions. Instead, Seung San gave him the job of cleaning toilets. For 6 months, that was Jiwoo's only assignment. Clean the toilets. Every day, the same task. No special teachings. No profound conversations. Just toilets. Jiwoo was frustrated and confused. He had not come all this way to be a janitor. He wanted transmission of wisdom, not toilet duty. But Seung San refused all his requests for different work or formal teaching. Clean toilet your job, that your teaching. You want different teaching, go different teacher. Jiwoo considered leaving many times, but something kept him there, kept him scrubbing toilets day after day, his frustration mounting. Then one morning, About 6 months into this practice, something shifted. Jiwoo was cleaning a toilet, his hands in dirty water, his knees on the cold floor. And suddenly, he saw clearly. His frustration was not about the toilets. It was about his attachment to a particular image of himself as a sophisticated spiritual practitioner. He wanted to be special, elevated, engaged in important matters of mind and spirit. But here was the truth. This moment, cleaning this toilet, was no less sacred than any moment of formal meditation or philosophical discussion. There was no hierarchy. The divine was as present in this dirty bathroom as in any meditation hall. His resistance to this simple work was his resistance to reality as it actually was, his insistence that some moments were more spiritual than others. With this realization, everything changed. The toilet was still dirty, his hands were still wet, but he was no longer suffering. He was present, fully engaged in this simple act of service, no longer arguing with reality about what he thought he should be doing instead. That afternoon, he sought out Shung-san. Before he could speak, the master smiled widely. "Ah, you finished cleaning toilet?" "Yes, master," Jiwoo said, bowing deeply. "Thank you for teaching me." "I teach you?" Shung-san asked with exaggerated surprise. "I only give you job. Toilet teach you. You thank toilet, not me." This made Jiwoo laugh, a genuine laugh from deep in his belly. He understood. The toilet had been his teacher. The frustration had been his teacher. The 6 months of repetitive, unglamorous work had been his teacher. Shung-san had simply created the conditions. But the actual teaching had come from Jiwoo's direct encounter with his own resistance and the gradual wearing away of that resistance through daily practice. He stayed at the temple for 3 more years, and during that time, he did many different kinds of work. But he never forgot the toilet teaching. It became a reference point, a reminder that every moment, every task, every encounter was an opportunity for awakening if he brought full presence to it. The teacher was everywhere, disguised as ordinary life. This story speaks to how teaching arrives in our lives. Often the most profound lessons come not from what we think of as spiritual experiences, but from exactly the situations we would rather avoid. The repetitive job that feels meaningless. The difficult person we cannot escape. The failure that humiliates us. The loss that breaks our heart. These are not obstacles to our spiritual development. They are the curriculum. The people who frustrate us, who waste our time, who fail to appreciate us, who challenge our self-image, they are all participating in our education. Not because they intend to teach us, but because our reactions to them reveal where we are still caught, still resisting, still clinging to particular stories about ourselves and how life should be. What is your toilet? What situation or person in your life feels like a frustrating waste of your time and potential? What if that very situation is your most important teacher right now? What if your resistance to it is precisely what needs to be seen and released? This does not mean you should never change your circumstances, but it does mean that wherever you are, whatever you are dealing with, there is teaching available if you are willing to receive it. Let your breath be your anchor as you drift deeper into rest. Breathing in, you acknowledge all the teachers who have appeared in your life. Breathing out, you release any resentment or confusion about why they came. Breathing in, you open to the possibility that everyone was perfectly cast in the story of your becoming. Breathing out, you relax into acceptance of what was, what is, what will be. There was a woman named Tomoko who worked as a nurse in a busy hospital. For years, she found her work deeply meaningful. She felt she was serving others, easing suffering, making a real difference. But then a new administrator was hired, a man named Sato, who immediately began changing policies and procedures. From Tomoko's perspective, these changes made everything worse. They prioritized efficiency over patient care, profit over compassion. Tomoko found herself in constant conflict with Sato. She argued against his policies in meetings, She complained about him to colleagues. She felt her work environment had become toxic. The job she once loved now felt like a burden. She began to dread going to work each day, her stomach tight with stress and anger. One evening, after a particularly difficult confrontation with Sato, Tomoko went to visit her grandmother, a woman who had practiced Buddhism her entire life. Tomoko poured out her frustration, expecting sympathy and support. Instead, her grandmother asked, "What is Sato teaching you?" Tomoko was taken aback. "Teaching me? He's not teaching me anything except how cruel and incompetent people can be." Her grandmother smiled gently. "I see. So he is teaching you about cruelty and incompetence. That is something. What else?" Tomoko wanted to argue, but her grandmother's calm presence made her pause and actually consider the question. "I suppose he's teaching me that I have no control over many things in my work environment." "Yes, that is an important teaching. What else?" "He's teaching me that my happiness cannot depend on external conditions being exactly how I want them." "Very good. What else?" This questioning continued, and gradually Tomoko began to see that Sato, as frustrating as he was actually serving a function in her development. He was showing her how much of her identity and sense of worth was tied to her work. He was revealing her attachment to being in control, to having things run according to her judgment. He was teaching her about equanimity in the face of difficulty, about maintaining her integrity and compassion, even when policies made it harder. None of this made Sato's decisions right or good. They might still be genuinely harmful, but it meant that Tomoko could extract teaching from the situation even while working to change what could be changed. Her grandmother offered one more insight. Perhaps Sato is also suffering. Perhaps he is under tremendous pressure from his superiors. Perhaps he is acting from fear rather than cruelty. This does not excuse his choices, but it makes him human rather than monster. When you can see his humanity, even when you disagree with his actions, you remain free. Your heart stays open. And from an open heart, you can be much more effective in creating change than from a closed, resentful heart. This conversation shifted something fundamental in Tomoko. She continued to advocate for better patient care. She continued to push back against policies she believed were harmful, but she did so without the personal resentment that had been poisoning her. She could see Sato as a complicated human being rather than a villain, and paradoxically, this shift made her more effective. Her arguments became clearer when they were not fueled by anger. Her colleagues responded better to her leadership when she modeled equanimity rather than bitterness. Eventually, Sato left the hospital for another position. Some of his policies were reversed, others remained. But Tomoko understood that the real change had happened inside herself. She had learned to maintain her center even in difficult conditions. She had learned that she could work for change without being destroyed by resistance to what is. And she understood that Sato, whatever his intentions, had been a powerful teacher in her life. This teaching is especially relevant for our work lives, where we often spend the majority of our waking hours in relationship with people we did not choose and may not like. What if every difficult colleague, every frustrating boss, every challenging client is a teacher? What if the workplace is actually a monastery in disguise, a place where our practice is constantly tested and refined? When we are sitting quietly on a meditation cushion with no demands or conflicts, it is relatively easy to feel peaceful. But maintaining equanimity while dealing with difficult people and frustrating situations, that is advanced practice. The workplace, the family, the community, these are the places where our realization is tested and made real. Think about the difficult people in your work life. What are they teaching you? About patience, about boundaries, about staying true to your values under pressure, about picking your battles, about working with people you do not necessarily like? These are not small teachings. These are the skills that determine the quality of your entire life. Your breathing continues its steady rhythm, requiring no thought, no effort. Just like this breath, wisdom continues to deepen in you without forcing, without striving, simply by being present, by listening to these stories. By opening to possibility that every person serves a purpose, you are doing the work. In ancient China, there was a wealthy merchant who had 3 sons. He loved all 3, but he worried that they were spoiled by comfort, that they had not developed the inner strength and wisdom necessary to handle the fortune they would inherit. So he devised a plan. He would send each son on a journey with very little money, requiring them to make their way in the world without the protection of family wealth and name. The first son was angry about this. He felt entitled to his father's support. He traveled reluctantly, complaining the entire time, treating people poorly, assuming the journey was a punishment. He learned very little and returned home bitter and resentful. The second son accepted the task dutifully. He traveled efficiently, completed the requirements his father had set, and returned home to report on his accomplishments. He had learned some practical skills, but had not been deeply changed by the experience. The third son, whose name was Chen, understood that this journey was a gift disguised as a challenge. He approached it with curiosity and openness. Every person he met, he treated as a potential teacher. The innkeeper who overcharged him taught him about discernment and protecting himself. The merchant who was scrupulously honest taught him about integrity in business. The thief who tried to rob him taught him about awareness and caution. The sick child he helped taught him about compassion. The monk he met on a mountain path taught him about impermanence and letting go. Chen kept a journal during his travels, recording not just events, but insights. He wrote about how each encounter, whether pleasant or difficult, revealed something about himself and the world. He noticed his own reactions, his judgments, his assumptions. He practiced meeting each person and situation with fresh awareness rather than preconceived categories. When he finally returned home after 2 years, his father could see immediately that Chen had been transformed. There was a depth to him now, a quiet confidence that came from genuine experience rather than inherited privilege. His brothers had completed their journeys, but Chen had been on a pilgrimage. "Tell me," his father said, "who was your greatest teacher during these travels?" Chen thought carefully. "There was a man in a small village who cheated me in a business deal. I lost most of my money and had to spend 3 months working as a laborer to earn enough to continue. I was furious with him. I plotted revenge. I lay awake at night, imagining ways to make him suffer as I was suffering." "And this was your greatest teacher?" his father asked. "Yes," Chen replied, "because working with my anger, seeing how it poisoned every moment, recognizing how much energy I was wasting on resentment, this taught me more than any pleasant experience could have. That man showed me my own capacity for hatred and the suffering that hatred creates. He showed me the importance of forgiveness, not for his sake, but for mine. When I finally let go of my resentment, I felt lighter than I had ever felt before. I understood that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That teaching has served me every day since." The father smiled. "Then that man gave you a priceless gift, even though he thought he was simply cheating you. He participated in your education, though he did not know it. This is how life works. Every person we encounter has something to offer, even if what they offer comes wrapped in difficulty." Chen went on to manage his father's business with wisdom and compassion. He was known for treating everyone with respect, from the wealthiest partners to the poorest workers. And when people asked him how he developed such equanimity and fairness, he would tell them about his journey and about the man who cheated him, the teacher he did not want but needed most. This story reminds us that our greatest growth often comes not from positive experiences, but from difficult ones. The people who challenge us, frustrate us, or even harm us are frequently the catalysts for profound development. This is not to say we should seek out difficult people or stay in harmful situations, but it is to say that when we find ourselves in difficulty, we can ask, "What is this here to teach me? How is this experience, painful as it is, contributing to my evolution. Think about your own journey. Who was the person you would least want to thank, but who actually taught you something crucial? The teacher who told you that you would never amount to anything, motivating you to prove them wrong and discover your own resilience. The friend who betrayed you, teaching you about discernment and the importance of choosing relationships carefully. The parent who was critical, showing you how you did not want to be and motivating you to develop a different approach. These people played important roles, even if those roles were painful. Breathe in the cool night air. Breathe out all the old stories of victimhood and blame. You are not a victim of your relationships. You are a student in the University of Human Connection, and every person who has ever crossed your path was a professor in this curriculum. Some were gentle teachers, others were harsh. But all had something to offer if you can receive it with an open heart. There was a young woman named Sakura who dreamed of becoming a great poet. She studied with a renowned master who was famous for his exacting standards and sharp criticism. For 3 years, she brought him her best work, and for 3 years, he tore it apart, pointing out every flaw, every weakness, every place where her language failed to match her vision. Sakura was devastated by this criticism. She cried after every session. She doubted her talent and her calling. She felt humiliated and small. Many times she almost quit, convinced that she would never be good enough, that her master's harshness was proof of her inadequacy. But something kept her returning, some stubborn refusal to give up, some sense that underneath the harsh criticism there was genuine teaching. And gradually, almost without noticing, her work improved. Not because she was trying to please her master, but because his relentless standards forced her to dig deeper, to refine her craft, to bring her absolute best to every line. After 3 years, she brought him a poem that she knew was different from all her previous work. It was true in a way her earlier poems had not been. It came from a deeper place. She waited, heart pounding, for his response. He read it in silence. Then he looked at her and said simply, "Yes, this is poetry." Those 4 words meant more than any praise she had ever received, because she knew they were earned. She knew that this moment was only possible because of all the harsh criticism that came before, all the necessary destruction of her comfortable mediocrity. "Master," she said, "why were you so hard on me?" He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. "Because I saw that you had genuine talent buried under layers of ego and self-deception and easy satisfaction. My harshness was not cruelty, it was excavation. I was digging through all the false layers to find the real poet underneath. If I had been gentle and encouraging, you would have remained comfortable in your mediocrity, pleased with yourself, never discovering what you were truly capable of." Sakura understood. Her master's harshness had been a form of love. Not the easy, comfortable love that makes no demands, but the fierce love that insists you become everything you are capable of becoming. He had believed in her potential even when she did not, and he had been willing to be the villain in her story in order to serve her development. She stayed with him for 2 more years, and their relationship deepened. Now that the foundation had been laid, he could be gentler. But she never forgot those first 3 years, the necessary fire that burned away everything that was not essential. Those years, as painful as they were the most important of her education. When she eventually left to pursue her own path, she thanked him for his harshness. "You gave me the greatest gift a teacher can give," she said. "You refused to let me be less than I could be." "You gave me a gift as well," he replied. "You did not quit. You trusted the process even when it felt terrible. You showed me that my harsh methods, which many students cannot tolerate, were exactly what you needed. You taught me to trust my instinct about which students need which approach." This story speaks to the importance of difficult teachers, those who do not make things easy, who demand excellence, who see through our defenses and excuses. In a culture that often values constant encouragement and positive reinforcement, we can forget that sometimes growth requires challenge, even discomfort. The teacher who tells us we are wonderful exactly as we are may make us feel good, but the teacher who insists we can be better is serving our evolution. This does not justify genuine cruelty or abuse. There is a difference between fierce love that serves growth and destructive criticism that serves the critic's own issues. Discernment is important, but many of us have had teachers, bosses, coaches, or mentors who were hard on us in ways that ultimately served us, even though it did not feel good at the time. Can you recognize those people as gifts, even if they were uncomfortable gifts? Your body has surrendered now to complete rest. Your conscious mind is quiet, drifting, barely following these words. That is perfect. The deepest teachings bypass the analyzing mind and plant themselves directly in your being, where they will germinate and grow in their own time. In a village by a river, there lived two sisters, Haru and Natsuki. Haru was beautiful and talented, beloved by everyone. Natsuki was plain and ordinary, often overlooked. Growing up in Haru's shadow was difficult for Natsuki. She felt invisible, unchosen, less than. A bitter jealousy grew in her heart, poisoning her relationship with her sister. This jealousy expressed itself in small cruelties. Natsuki would make cutting remarks disguised as jokes. She would compete with Haru over trivial things. She would feel satisfaction when Haru experienced disappointment or failure. And underneath all of this was a profound sadness, a sense that she was fundamentally inadequate, that her very existence was defined by not being Haru. This pattern continued into adulthood. Both sisters married and had children, but Natsuki's jealousy did not diminish. If anything, it grew worse, as Haru's life seemed to unfold with ease and grace, while Natsuki struggled with every challenge. Then one year, everything changed. Haru became seriously ill. The beautiful, vibrant sister that everyone loved became thin and weak, confined to her bed. Natsuki, despite their difficult relationship, came to help care for her. In those long days and nights of caregiving, something unexpected happened. Natsuki saw her sister's vulnerability, her fear, her pain. She saw that Haru's beauty and talent had not protected her from suffering. She saw that Haru too struggled with doubt and loneliness, that the perfect life everyone envied was not so perfect from the inside. And more than this, Natsuki discovered something about herself. She discovered that she was capable of deep compassion. She discovered that she could show up with love even when it was hard. She discovered a strength she did not know she possessed. All those years of feeling ordinary and overlooked had actually developed in her a resilience and depth that now served both sisters. One night, sitting by Haru's bedside, Natsuki said something she had never expected to say. "Thank you for being who you are, for being beautiful and talented, for being the person everyone loved. I spent my whole life resenting you for it, but I see now that you were my greatest teacher." Haru, weak but conscious, looked at her sister with surprise. "Teacher? I do not understand." "You taught me everything," Natsuki said. "You taught me about jealousy and how it poisons the heart. You taught me about comparison and how it creates suffering. You taught me that everyone's life, no matter how it looks from outside, contains struggle. And by living in your shadow, I developed qualities I would not have developed otherwise. I became strong because I had to be. I became independent because I could not rely on being chosen first. I became compassionate because I knew what it felt like to feel less than." Tears streamed down both their faces. "And you have been my teacher too," Haru said quietly. "Your resentment, painful as it was, showed me that I could not control how people perceived me or felt about me. It taught me about the loneliness of being idealized rather than truly known. Your presence in my life forced me to develop humility, to recognize that my gifts were not achievements, but accidents of birth. You taught me that beauty and talent do not guarantee happiness or love." In those months of Haru's illness, the sisters' relationship healed in ways neither had imagined possible. They were able to speak honestly for the first time about the pain they had caused each other and the teaching they had offered each other. They recognized that they had been perfectly designed to polish each other, like two stones in a tumbler, gradually wearing away each other's rough edges through constant friction. Haru eventually recovered, though she was never quite as strong or vibrant as before. But the relationship between the sisters was stronger than it had ever been. They had moved from unconscious teaching to conscious recognition, from resentment to gratitude, from separation to genuine intimacy. Years later, when asked about the most important relationship in her life, Natsuki would speak of her sister. She came into my life to show me my own shadow, my own capacity for jealousy and resentment. And by showing me these things, she gave me the opportunity to work with them, to transform them. Every difficult emotion she triggered in me was an invitation to deeper understanding. I spent 40 years missing that invitation, lost in resentment. But eventually, I heard the call, and everything changed. This story speaks to sibling relationships, but its teaching applies to any relationship where comparison and competition arise. Colleagues, friends, fellow students. These relationships often contain elements of comparison that can become toxic if not examined. The person who seems to have everything you want is showing you your own unacknowledged desires. They are showing you where you are still operating from a scarcity mindset, believing that another's gain is your loss. They are teaching you to celebrate others' success without making it mean something about your own worth. Do you have a person in your life who triggers comparison and jealousy? Can you see them as a teacher, showing you where you still need to grow? Can you thank them silently for revealing this work you need to do? This does not mean you should maintain relationships that feel toxic. But before you walk away, extract the teaching. Otherwise, you will simply attract another person who triggers the same issues in a different form. Breathe deeply. Let your belly rise and fall. You are held, supported, safe. Every person who has ever made you feel less than was actually showing you the beliefs you held about yourself, beliefs that were waiting to be seen and released. They were not creating your inadequacy. They were revealing it so it could be healed. There was an old fisherman named Takeo who lived on the coast and spent his days in a small boat, casting nets into the sea. He loved the solitude, the rhythm of waves, the simplicity of his life. For many years, he fished alone, content with his own company. Then one season, a young man named Riku came to the village looking for work. He had no family, no home, nowhere else to go. Takeo, against his usual preference for solitude, offered Riku a place to stay and taught him how to fish. He told himself it was just for one season, just until the young man got on his feet. But Riku did not leave after one season. He proved to be a good worker and pleasant company. Takeo found himself enjoying their conversations on the boat, their shared meals, their growing friendship. Years passed. Riku became like a son to Takeo, the child he had never had. They worked together, laughed together, faced storms together. Takeo's heart, which had been carefully guarded for so long, opened wide. Then, one spring morning, Takeo woke to find Riku gone. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. He had simply left in the night, taking with him some of Takeo's money and his best fishing equipment. Takeo was devastated. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. He had opened his heart, trusted completely, and been abandoned without even the dignity of an explanation. For months, Takeo could barely function. He went through the motions of fishing, but the joy was gone. He felt like a fool for having trusted, for having loved. He vowed never to open his heart again, never to be so vulnerable. The pain was too great. Better to return to his solitude, his carefully protected independence. One evening, as he sat mending nets, an old woman from the village approached him. Her name was Misaki, and she had a reputation for speaking truth without softness. She sat down without asking permission and said, "You are suffering." Takeo did not deny it. "You feel betrayed. You feel like a fool. You wish you had never met Riku. Yes, Takeo said bitterly. He destroyed my peace. Misaki was quiet for a moment, watching the sun set over the water. Then she said, Did Riku force you to care for him? No, Takeo admitted. I chose to help him. Did he force you to open your heart? No, that was my choice too. Then what exactly did he take from you? He took some money and equipment, yes, but what he really disturbed was your strategy of keeping your heart closed, of staying safe through isolation. He cracked open your carefully constructed walls, and now you are angry at him for this, as if he has harmed you. He did harm me, Takeo protested. He betrayed my trust. Yes, he did, Misaki agreed. And that betrayal is teaching you something important. It is teaching you the difference between wise trust and naive trust. It is teaching you that opening your heart does not mean abandoning discernment. It is teaching you that love and loss are inseparable, that you cannot have the joy of connection without accepting the possibility of pain. So I should just accept what he did? Takeo asked angrily. No, Misaki said. You should feel what you feel. Grief, anger, disappointment, these are natural responses to betrayal. But you should also extract the teaching. Riku came into your life for a reason. He came to crack open your closed heart. He came to show you that you were capable of love and connection, that your isolation was a choice, not a necessity. Yes, he also showed you that people can disappoint and betray. But that is part of the full teaching of relationship. Takeo sat with these words for a long time. Slowly, over many months, he began to see that Misaki was right. Riku had given him an unexpected gift. For those years, they were together. Takeo had experienced a richness of life he had never known before. He had laughed more, felt more, lived more fully. The fact that it ended in betrayal did not erase those years or make them less valuable. Moreover, Riku had shown Takeo something about himself. He had revealed Takeo's capacity for generosity, for mentoring, for love. These capacities were still there, still real, regardless of Riku's departure. Takeo could choose to shut down completely, returning to his isolated safety. Or he could take the teaching and remain open, more wisely this time, but still open. He chose to remain open. Not foolishly, not without appropriate caution, but open nonetheless. A few years later, another young person came to the village needing help. This time, Takeo approached the relationship differently. He helped but maintained clearer boundaries. He cared but did not make the person's approval or presence necessary for his own well-being. He loved but also protected himself. This balance was possible only because of what Riku had taught him. Near the end of his life, when people asked Takeo about his greatest teacher, he would sometimes speak of Riku. He taught me that love is worth the risk, even when it ends in pain. He taught me that an open heart, even when wounded, is more alive than a protected heart. He taught me the difference between isolation and solitude, between naive trust and wise trust. These teachings came at a high cost, but they were worth it. This story addresses one of the most painful types of relationship, betrayal by someone we trusted deeply. These experiences can close our hearts permanently if we let them. We can decide that trust is foolish, that love is dangerous, that isolation is safer. But this decision, while understandable, cuts us off from the very experiences that make life meaningful. The alternative is to extract the teaching while remaining open, to learn appropriate boundaries without building walls, to develop discernment without becoming cynical, to acknowledge that betrayal hurts without deciding that all people are untrustworthy. This is difficult, nuanced work, but it is the work that allows us to move forward with wisdom rather than armor. Have you been betrayed? Have you trusted someone who proved unworthy of that trust? What did that experience teach you? Not just about other people, but about yourself. What did it reveal about your needs, your patterns, your way of relating? Can you honor the pain while also receiving the teaching? Your breath is so slow now, so quiet. You are drifting in deep rest, your body completely relaxed, your mind open and receptive. These stories are seeds planted in fertile soil. They will grow in their own time, bearing fruit you cannot yet imagine. In the mountains of Tibet, there was a monastery where monks practiced for decades, seeking enlightenment through meditation, study, and devotion. One young monk named Thupten was particularly earnest in his practice. He meditated for hours each day, prostrated thousands of times, memorized extensive texts. He was admired by other monks for his dedication. But despite all this effort, Thupten felt stuck. He had moments of clarity during meditation, but no breakthrough, no sustained realization. He began to feel discouraged, wondering if he was somehow fundamentally incapable of awakening. His teacher, seeing Thupten's struggle, gave him a new assignment. Instead of more meditation, more study, more practice, he was to leave the monastery for 1 year and work in the nearby village. Specifically, he was to care for an elderly woman named Dolma who was dying and had no family. Thupten was confused and disappointed. How would caring for a dying woman advance his spiritual practice? But he was obedient to his teacher, so he went. Dolma was difficult from the beginning. She was in pain, frightened, and she expressed her fear through anger. She criticized everything Thupten did. She complained constantly. She woke him in the night with demands. She was ungrateful and harsh. Thupten found himself stretched beyond anything his monastery practice had prepared him for. In the meditation hall, he could cultivate patience and compassion in the abstract. But here, with Dolma's actual suffering and difficult personality, his patience evaporated quickly. He found himself irritated, resentful, counting the days until his year of service would be over. Then one night, about 6 months into his service, Dolma had a particularly difficult episode. She was in terrible pain, terrified, crying out. Thupten stayed with her through the night, doing what little he could to ease her suffering. In those long hours, watching this woman face her mortality with such fear, something shifted in him. He saw that all his monastery practice had been, in some sense, theoretical. He had been practicing compassion for the idea of suffering beings, but not for an actual suffering being right in front of him. He had been cultivating patience with his own thoughts and feelings, but not with another person's difficult behavior. He had been seeking enlightenment for himself, but not discovering it through service to another. In that night, caring for Dolma, he touched something real. His heart cracked open in a way it never had in the meditation hall. He felt genuine compassion, not as a spiritual concept, but as a lived experience. He met suffering directly, not as something to transcend, but as something to be with, to honor, to hold with tenderness. From that night forward, his service to Dolma changed. He was still doing the same tasks, but from a completely different place. He was no longer counting days until his service ended. He was present, fully engaged, meeting each moment with as much care as he could offer. When Dolma finally died, Thupten was with her. Her last words to him were, "Thank you." Just those 2 words, but they carried a weight that moved him deeply. He had served her, yes, but she had given him something infinitely more valuable. She had given him the opportunity to practice for real, to test and deepen his compassion in the fire of actual relationship, rather than the safety of solitary meditation. When he returned to the monastery, his teacher saw immediately that something fundamental had changed. Thupten had a depth now that all his previous practice had not created. "Tell me what you learned," the teacher said. "I learned that the greatest teachings come not from study or meditation, but from relationship," Thupten replied. "Dolma was angry, difficult, and demanding, and she was the greatest teacher I have ever had. She showed me where my compassion was real and where it was just a pleasant idea. She demanded that I bring my full presence and patience, not for 1 hour on a meditation cushion, but for months in the messy reality of life. She taught me that awakening is not something we achieve alone, but something that happens in the space between us and another." His teacher smiled. This is why I sent you to her. All your years of practice here were preparation. But the real practice, the practice that transforms, happens in relationship. The monastery teaches you techniques, but life teaches you application. And the difficult people, the ones who demand everything from us, they are the most profound teachers because they allow no hiding, no spiritual bypassing, no comfortable distance from real suffering. Thupten stayed at the monastery, but he was changed. He volunteered regularly in the village, working with sick people, difficult people, people no one else wanted to deal with. And his realization deepened through these encounters in ways that solitary practice alone never achieved. This story points to something essential. Spiritual practice that remains only in the realm of meditation, study, and retreat can become a kind of escape from the very challenges that catalyze real transformation. The difficult people in our lives are not obstacles to our practice. They are the practice. They show us where we are still reactive, still defended, still caught in our stories. They demand that we bring our understanding into lived action. Many people pursue spirituality as a way to transcend difficult relationships, to rise above human messiness into some pure state of peace. But true spirituality moves in the opposite direction. It moves deeper into relationship, into engagement, into the complex reality of caring for and connecting with actual imperfect human beings. This is where the rubber meets the road, where our beautiful concepts are tested and either proven real or revealed as fantasy. Who is the difficult person in your life right now? The one who demands your patience, challenges your compassion, tests your equanimity. What if this person is your greatest spiritual teacher? What if they are showing you exactly where you need to grow? Can you receive their difficulty as a gift, even while setting appropriate boundaries and taking care of yourself? Breathe into your belly. Let the breath be slow and deep. You are safe here, held in the darkness, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of all those who have walked the path of relationship before you. They discovered that love is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of commitment to stay engaged, to keep the heart open, even when it hurts. There was a painter named Aiko, who lived in a small town and supported herself by teaching art to children. She loved this work and found deep satisfaction in helping young people discover their creativity. One year, a new student joined her class, a girl named Yui who had extraordinary natural talent, but a very difficult personality. Yui was critical of other students, dismissive of Aiko's teaching methods, and generally disruptive in class. Aiko found herself dreading the days when Yui would be there. She considered asking the girl to leave, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the flash of genuine brilliance in Yui's work. Perhaps it was the recognition of some deep hurt beneath the girl's defensive attitude. So Aiko persisted, trying different approaches, setting firm boundaries when necessary, but not giving up on Yui. This went on for 2 years. It was exhausting. There were many moments when Aiko questioned why she was investing so much energy in this one difficult student when she had so many others who were grateful and responsive. Then one day, Yui brought Aiko a painting. It was unlike anything the girl had created before. It was technically brilliant, but also emotionally raw, vulnerable in a way Yui had never allowed herself to be. She handed it to Aiko without a word. Aiko looked at the painting for a long time. Then she looked at Yui and saw tears in the girl's eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Yui said quietly. "Everyone else does. You are the first teacher who stayed." In that moment, Aiko understood. Yui's difficult behavior had been a test, an unconscious way of asking, "Will you abandon me like everyone else? Will you prove that I am not worth the effort?" By staying engaged, by maintaining boundaries, but not rejecting Yui entirely, Aiko had given the girl something she desperately needed, the experience of not being abandoned despite her difficulty. But the teaching went both ways. Yui had given Aiko something equally valuable. She had taught Aiko about persistence, about seeing beyond behavior to the wounded person underneath, about the power of committed presence even when there is no immediate reward. She had shown Aiko her own capacity to love the difficult and unlovable, a capacity Aiko did not know she possessed. Years later, Yui became a successful artist. She stayed in touch with Aiko, and in every exhibition, she made sure to thank the teacher who would not quit on me. But Aiko knew that the real gift was not the gratitude or the validation. The real gift was what Yui had drawn out of her, the qualities and strengths that would never have developed without this particular challenge. This story speaks to teachers, parents, mentors, anyone who works with difficult people and wonders if their effort matters. It matters more than you know. Your persistence, your refusal to give up, your willingness to stay engaged even when it is thankless, this is teaching at the highest level. Not by what you say, but by what you demonstrate through your actions. And if you are on the other side, if you recognize yourself as the difficult person who tests others' patience, know that you are also teaching. You are showing people their own strength, their capacity for patience and unconditional positive regard. This does not excuse genuinely harmful behavior. We all have a responsibility to work on ourselves, to not use our wounds as weapons. But it does mean that even in your difficulty, you are serving a function in others' growth. Let your body sink deeper into rest. Let your mind release all the narratives of good and bad, victim and perpetrator, teacher and student. These roles are fluid. We move between them constantly. Sometimes in the same relationship, we play all these roles at different moments. There is no fixed position, only the endless dance of mutual influence and transformation. In a coastal village, there was a woman named Kiyomi who ran a small shop selling handmade crafts. She was friendly with many people in the village, but had one true intimate friend, a woman named Emiko, whom she had known since childhood. They told each other everything, supported each other through every difficulty, celebrated each other's joys. Their friendship was the anchor of both their lives. Then Kiyomi went through a period of deep depression. Her husband died unexpectedly, leaving her with debts and overwhelming grief. She withdrew from her shop, from her community, from everything that had once brought her joy. The only person she still allowed into her life was Emiko. But Emiko did not know how to handle Kiyomi's profound grief. She tried to cheer her friend up, offering cheerful platitudes and encouragement. When that did not work, she tried to give advice, suggesting that Kiyomi should move on, that her husband would want her to be happy. When that failed, she began to pull away, uncomfortable with the depth of Kiyomi's suffering, unable to simply be present with pain she could not fix. Eventually, Emiko stopped visiting. She made excuses, said she was busy, but the truth was she could not handle Kiyomi's depression. She felt helpless and uncomfortable. And so she abandoned her friend in her darkest time. Kiyomi felt this abandonment acutely. It was almost worse than her husband's death because it was a choice. Her husband had not chosen to leave, but Emiko had chosen to walk away when she was most needed. The betrayal cut deep, adding another layer of grief to an already overwhelming loss. For 2 years, they did not speak. Kiyomi slowly emerged from her depression, rebuilt her life, found new ways to carry her grief. But she carried bitterness toward Emiko, a hard seed of resentment that would not dissolve. Then one day, Kiyomi heard that Emiko's son had fallen seriously ill. Without thinking, without planning, she found herself at Emiko's door with food, with presents, with the offer to help. Emiko opened the door and started to cry. They stood there for a long moment, all the unspoken pain and betrayal hanging between them. Finally, Emiko said, "I do not deserve your help. I was not there for you when you needed me." "No, you were not," Kiyomi agreed. "You abandoned me when I was at my lowest, and it hurt terribly." "I'm so sorry," Emiko said. "I did not know how to help you. I was afraid of your pain. I failed you." Kiyomi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You did fail me. But you also taught me something important. You taught me about the limits of friendship, about how even people who love us can fail us when our suffering exceeds their capacity. You taught me not to make any one person responsible for my well-being, not to lean so heavily on one relationship. You taught me about forgiveness, about how people's limitations are not always personal betrayals, but simply human weakness. She paused, then continued. And you taught me about my own capacity to survive even when abandoned. I thought I needed you to get through my grief, but I discovered I could survive without you. This was a painful but valuable teaching. So yes, you failed me, but you also served my growth in that failure. Emiko and Kiyomi did not return to their previous level of intimacy. The relationship had been changed by what happened, and that change was permanent. But they did develop a new kind of friendship, more realistic, less dependent, based on clear seeing rather than idealization. They had learned that friendship is not the absence of failure, but the willingness to work with failure when it occurs. Years later, Kiyomi would tell people that Emiko's abandonment, as painful as it was, taught her more than all their years of easy friendship. When someone fails you, she would say, they teach you about the nature of relationship itself, about how people's capacity varies, how we all have limits, how love alone is not always enough to make people capable of meeting our needs. This is not a pleasant teaching, but it is a necessary one. It prevents us from placing unfair burdens on relationships and then feeling betrayed when those relationships cannot carry the weight. This story addresses a particularly painful form of betrayal, abandonment in our time of greatest need. These experiences can make us cynical about friendship and love, can convince us never to be vulnerable again. But they can also teach us about realistic expectations, about the importance of having multiple sources of support, about developing our own inner resources rather than depending entirely on external help. Have you been abandoned by someone you thought would always be there? What did that teach you? About them, yes. But more importantly, about yourself, about your resilience, your capacity to survive, your ability to stand alone when necessary. Can you recognize that the person who failed you was also, in their failure, showing you your own strength? Breathe deeply. Let the breath carry away any resentment you are holding toward those who disappointed you. They were human, limited, struggling with their own issues. Their inability to meet your needs was not a statement about your worth. It was a statement about their capacity in that moment. You can acknowledge your hurt while also releasing them from the burden of your expectation that they should have been different than they were. There was a monk named Hoshin who lived to be 106 years old. In his final days, students gathered around him, asking him to share the most important teaching from his century of practice. He was quiet for a long time, seeming to sort through countless memories and insights. Finally, he spoke. The most important teaching I can give you is this. Every person who has entered my life was a Buddha in disguise. The kind ones showed me the beauty of compassion and connection. The difficult ones showed me my own rough edges, the places where I still needed to grow. The ones who loved me taught me about opening and receiving. The ones who hurt me taught me about boundaries and discernment. The ones who stayed taught me about commitment. The ones who left taught me about impermanence and letting go. He paused, gathering strength to continue. For many years, I divided people into categories: helpful and harmful, friend and enemy, teacher and obstacle. But this division was my own confusion. Eventually, I saw that every person, regardless of their role or behavior, was participating in my awakening, not because they intended to teach me, but because I chose to learn from every encounter. A student asked, "But Master, surely some people are genuinely harmful and should be avoided." Yes, Hoshin agreed. Wisdom includes discernment and appropriate boundaries. I did not maintain relationships with everyone who crossed my path. Some people I spent time with, others I moved away from. But even the people I chose to avoid taught me something valuable. They taught me about discernment, about protecting my energy, about saying no. So even in the stepping away, there was teaching. Another student asked, "How do we know what someone has come to teach us?" Hoshin smiled gently. Pay attention to what you feel when you are with them. Whatever emotion arises strongly, whatever pattern gets triggered, that is pointing to your curriculum. If someone makes you angry, they are teaching you about anger. If someone makes you jealous, they are teaching you about comparison and desire. If someone makes you feel safe and loved, they are teaching you about your capacity to receive care. If someone disappoints you, they are teaching you about expectations and resilience. The teaching is not always comfortable, he continued. In fact, the most important teachings often come through discomfort. But if you can stay curious instead of defensive, if you can ask, "What is this showing me?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" then every relationship becomes a doorway to deeper self-understanding. A young nun asked, "Is there anyone in your life you wish you had never met?" Hoshin considered this carefully. "No," he finally said. "There were people who caused me great pain. There were people whose actions I do not condone or excuse. But I would not wish them out of my story because they shaped me in essential ways. Without the difficult people, I would have remained spiritually comfortable, practicing in a safe cocoon, never really tested. They forced me to grow in ways I would not have chosen, but now treasure." His students sat in silence, absorbing this teaching. Then Hoshin said, "I am dying now. Soon I will leave you, and you will have a choice about how to receive my leaving. You can focus on the loss, on the grief, on wishing I could stay, or you can recognize that even my death is a teaching. It is teaching you about impermanence, about the preciousness of time, about standing on your own feet spiritually rather than depending on a teacher." Both responses are natural. Feel the grief, yes, but also receive the teaching. He died 3 days later, peacefully, surrounded by students who had learned from him not just through his words and formal teaching, but through his presence, his choices, his way of being in the world. And in his dying, he gave them one last powerful teaching about letting go with grace, about facing the ultimate transition with equanimity and trust. At his funeral, students shared stories about how he had influenced them, but they also shared stories about all the people in their own lives who had served as teachers. Parents, friends, enemies, strangers, everyone was acknowledged as part of the great web of teaching that constitutes a human life. They understood, because Hoshin had shown them, that spiritual practice is not separate from relationship, it is relationship. Every encounter is an opportunity for awakening if we bring the right attitude. This story brings us to the heart of tonight's teaching. People do not enter your life by chance. They enter according to mysterious patterns and purposes that we may not fully understand, but can learn to trust. Some people arrive to comfort you, some to challenge you. Some arrive to stay, some to pass through briefly, but all arrive to serve your evolution in some way, and to receive from you whatever you have to offer in return. This is not the same as saying that everything happens for a reason in some cosmic plan. It is saying something more subtle. It is saying that regardless of why things happen, we can choose to extract meaning and learning from what does happen. We can choose to see the people in our lives as teachers, rather than random actors on a stage. This choice transforms everything. Let yourself rest now in the deepest way possible. Let your body be completely held by whatever supports you. Let your mind release all grasping, all resistance, all need to understand or control. You are safe. You are held. You are surrounded by the love and wisdom of all beings who have ever walked this path, all who have discovered that relationship is not an obstacle to awakening, but its very ground. As you drift towards sleep, let these final words settle into your consciousness like seeds in fertile earth. Every person you have ever known has served your becoming. Every relationship has shaped you in ways visible and invisible. The ones who stayed and the ones who left. The ones who loved you and the ones who hurt you. The ones who saw your potential and the ones who doubted you. All have been your teachers. you can release any resentment you carry toward those who disappointed you. They were doing the best they could with the consciousness they had. Their limitations were not personal attacks. They were simply the conditions that existed, and those conditions taught you something you needed to learn. You can release any guilt you carry for times you failed others, times you were not the friend or partner or family member you wished to be. You too were doing your best. And your limitations, your failures, your mistakes, they also served. They taught the people around you about forgiveness, about realistic expectations, about their own strength. We are all teaching each other all the time, not through perfection, but through our very human imperfection. You can open yourself to the relationships that are still to come, knowing that each new person will bring new teachings. Some will be gentle teachers, some fierce. Some will stay a lifetime, some only a moment. But all will serve if you remain open and attentive. You can offer gratitude for every person who has shaped your journey, not because they were all kind or good, but because they were all necessary. They were all part of the tapestry that is your unique life. Remove any thread, and the whole pattern changes. Every person belongs to your story. As sleep takes you now, let go of all the stories of good and bad, right and wrong, victim and perpetrator. Rest in the simple truth that you are part of an interconnected web of relationship that stretches backward to the beginning of time and forward to the end of time. Every person who has ever lived has influenced every other person in ways we cannot measure. We are all teaching each other, learning from each other, shaping each other through the simple fact of our existence. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You are held in this great web of connection, supported by countless seen and unseen relationships. The grandmother who raised your parent, the stranger who smiled at you on a difficult day, the teacher who believed in you, the friend who challenged you, the lover who opened your heart, the enemy who strengthened your boundaries. All of them are part of you now. They live in your consciousness, in your choices, in the person you have become. Rest in this knowledge. Let it comfort you as you drift into sleep. People do not enter your life by chance. They enter because you are ready for what they will teach you, and they are ready for what you will teach them. The universe arranges these encounters with perfect precision, not through divine intervention, but through the natural unfolding of interconnection. We are all seeking, growing, learning, and we do it together through relationship, through the endless dance of meeting and parting, connection and separation, love and loss. Sleep now, dear one. Let these teachings sink into your deepest consciousness, where they will work on you in ways your conscious mind cannot direct. Trust that every relationship has served you. Trust that every person has been necessary. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be, shaped by everyone who has ever touched your life, ready for everyone yet to come. May you rest in peace. May you wake with gratitude. May you move through your days recognizing the sacred nature of every encounter, every conversation, every moment of connection. May you see the Buddha in every face, the teacher in every challenge, the gift in every difficulty. People do not enter your life by chance. They enter to wake you up, and in waking you, they are themselves awakened. This is the great mystery and gift of relationship. This is the path of spiritual growth that winds through every human connection. Rest now in this truth. Sleep deeply. And when you wake, carry this wisdom with you into all your relationships, transforming how you see, how you love, how you learn. Good night. May all beings be at peace. May all beings know they are connected. May all beings recognize each other as teachers on this shared journey home. The night is deep now, and you are drifting in that sacred space between waking and sleeping. That threshold where the boundaries of self become permeable, and you can sense the vast web of connection that links all beings. In this space, the teaching can go deeper, moving beyond words into direct understanding. Imagine now that you can see the thread of influence that connects you to every person who has ever been part of your life. Some threads glow brightly, representing relationships that were conscious and intense. Others are faint, barely visible, representing brief encounters that nevertheless left their mark. But they are all there, all part of the intricate pattern that makes you uniquely yourself. Follow one of these threads back to someone who hurt you, someone whose memory still carries a charge of pain or resentment. Instead of pushing away from this memory, move closer to it. See this person not as they appeared in your story, but as a complete human being with their own story, their own wounds, their own limited understanding. See that they were doing the best they could from where they stood. This does not excuse their behavior, but it makes it comprehensible, human. Now see what their presence in your life called forth from you. What strength did you have to develop to handle their difficulty? What boundaries did you learn to set? What understanding of human complexity did they force you to acknowledge? The teaching is there, woven into the pain. Can you touch it without being overwhelmed by the hurt? Follow another thread to someone you loved deeply, someone who may no longer be in your life or who has died. Feel the sweetness of what they gave you. Feel the joy of connection, the gift of being seen and valued. Let yourself fully receive what they offered, holding it as treasure in your heart. And if there is grief because they are gone, let that grief be there too. Grief is love's shadow. Where there is no love, there is no grief. So your grief is actually a testament to how fully you loved, how deeply you connected. Honor it. Follow another thread to someone you barely knew, someone who passed through your life briefly but left an unexpected impact. A teacher who said one thing that changed your trajectory, a stranger who showed up at the right moment. A brief friend who cracked something open in you. These seemingly small encounters are often profoundly important. They show us that teaching does not require duration or depth of relationship. Sometimes a 5-minute conversation can shift everything. Now expand your awareness to sense all the threads at once, the entire web of relationship that has shaped you. See how nothing in your life has been random or meaningless. Every encounter has added something, taken something, shifted something. You are the sum total of all these influences, and yet you are also more than that sum. You are the awareness that can look back on all of it and extract meaning, that can learn and grow and transform through every experience. From this perspective, can you feel gratitude for it all? Not because it was all pleasant or easy, but because it was all necessary. Can you thank the universe, or life, or whatever name you give to the mystery, for the perfect curriculum of your relationships? Can you trust that even the hardest lessons served your evolution? As you rest here in this deep awareness, let any remaining resentment drain away like water flowing downhill. You do not need to carry it anymore. The teaching has been received. The people who hurt you have already given you what they came to give. You can release them now, freeing them from the burden of your ongoing anger, freeing yourself from the burden of carrying that anger. Let it go. Let it dissolve into the night. Let any guilt or shame about your own failures in relationship dissolve as well. You have been learning, growing, making mistakes, and trying again. This is the human journey. You have taught others through your limitations, just as they have taught you through theirs. There is nothing to forgive because there was never any sin, only learning, only the gradual awakening of consciousness through countless encounters. Feel yourself held in the great web of being, connected to all people across time and space. You are not separate. You are part of the vast interbeing that includes every human who has ever lived. Their teachings live in you through culture, through language, through the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. And your learning will flow forward to those yet to come, contributing to the great river of human evolution. Rest now in this belonging. You are home. You have always been home. The people in your life have been guides helping you remember this. Each one pointing in their own way toward the truth of interconnection. Even in their failure, Even in their limitation, even in their hurting, they were pointing. And you, in your learning, in your growing, in your gradual awakening, you are pointing too, showing others what it looks like to transform pain into wisdom, difficulty into teaching, experience into understanding. Sleep deeply now, held by the love that moves through all beings, the love that connects stranger to stranger, friend to friend, enemy to enemy, revealing that underneath all the surface differences and conflicts, there is only one heart learning to know itself through countless forms. You are that heart. Everyone you have ever known is that heart. We are all that heart, beating in different rhythms, playing different notes, but participating in one great symphony of becoming. May you rest in perfect peace. May you wake with clear seeing. May you meet every person as the teacher they are. May you walk through life with an open heart and wise discernment, grateful for every encounter, learning from every relationship, awake to the sacred nature of all connection. The teaching is complete. The night receives you. Sleep.